Hello, this is Grant Hughes of Grant Hughes Investigates on YouTube. Please hit the like, share, and subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. As we all know, Ethan Chapin, Zaina Kernodle, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Gonzalez were all murdered at their residence located at 1122 King Road, Moscow, Idaho. About 6 weeks later, an individual named Bryan Kohberger was arrested in Pennsylvania and extradited back to the state of Idaho. After being extradited back to Idaho, a probable cause document was released, and that is where the information we'll be discussing today came from. We will be discussing the movements of Bryan Kohberger's cell phone and the suspect vehicle, the white Elantra. Some of the information that you'll see here will be speculation on my part based on the facts presented in the probable cause document. In the early morning hours of November 13, 2022, a white Elantra can be seen on camera heading towards Highway 270 at 2:53 a.m. Highway 270 leads to Moscow, Idaho. A vehicle that matches the white Elantra that had left Pullman, Washington at 2:53 is seen on camera in the 700 block of Indian Hills Drive at 3:26 a.m. This is likely the house that had the camera, as you can see. And passes another camera at an A&W restaurant at the corner of Steiner Avenue and Idaho State Highway 95. This surveillance footage is at 3:28 a.m. The suspect vehicle is then seen in the area of the 1122 King Road residence, passing 3 times prior to the murders. The white Elantra is then seen leaving the area at a high rate of speed at 420 via Walenta Drive, which we will discuss later. According to the probable cause document, a DoorDash delivery driver reported that he delivered a meal to Zaina Kernodle at around 4 a.m. The meal is likely from Jack in the Box in Pullman, Washington, as the Jack in the Box in Moscow, Idaho is no longer in business. There are images in the kitchen at 1122 King Road that show a bag delivered to Zaina Kernodle from Jack in the Box, and it looks like a fresh bag, making it likely that that's where the delivery came from. I called the Pullman, Washington Jack in the Box, and they do cleaning daily from 4 to 5 a.m. and are open all of the other 23 hours. The precise time the DoorDash driver arrived and left is not known to the general public. Then the white Elantra, the suspect vehicle that was originally seen at 3:26 a.m. in the Moscow, Idaho area, drives into the area down Queen Road, passes the residence, and eventually turns around at 500 Queen Road, number 52. The document calls Queen Road King Road, and it's easy to understand why they might call it that, but it's actually Queen Road there. There's a camera on the building where the red arrow is pointing at right there, and I think that is where they could see the vehicle turning around. Then the vehicle goes westbound on Queen Road. It unsuccessfully tries to park or turn around. They weren't really sure. And then the vehicle goes forward, passes the 1112 camera, which is on King Road as well, does a 3-point turn, and then drives down Queen Road again. And then this is where I speculate that the vehicle parked back behind the building in that parking lot there at around 4:05 or 6. and then probably exits the vehicle at 4:07, goes into the building, kills all 4 victims, and leaves by 4:18. So it could even be later that he entered the building, 4:06 to 4:18. Now, he could have went into the building at 4:10, 4:11, 4:12, and then he gets into his vehicle at 4:20 and speeds out of the neighborhood, going down Walenta Drive. And based on camera information where his car did not go by, they believe that his vehicle came out at Conestoga Drive and Palusa River Drive. He likely wouldn't have sped through this area, as he wouldn't have wanted to draw attention to himself. At this point, it's very likely that he has a bloody knife and clothing, and he needs to get rid of that as soon as possible. Bryan Kohberger likely has a huge adrenaline surge going on right now as he's driving, and he's executing the full plan that he had laid out. Right here is where the white Elantra comes out of the neighborhood at Palusa River Drive and Conestoga Drive. He is now about to begin the longer journey home using Route 95 and then eventually coming up Route 195 heading into Pullman, Washington. Bryan Kohberger heads south on Highway 95 with his phone still turned off. He then turns his phone on when he's nearing Blaine, Idaho on Highway 95. What's interesting about this, it doesn't ping there until 4:48. He left the 1122 King Road address at 4:20. It should have only taken 11 minutes to get to this area. So it seems like there are 17 minutes of missing time prior to pinging near Blaine, Idaho. Is this where Bryan Kohberger ditched the bloody knife and bloody clothing, as surely he would not want to be driving a long distance with a bloody knife and bloody clothing on him? He then continues his route home. It should have only taken 55 minutes to drive from 1122 King Road to Bryan Kohberger's residence in Pullman, Washington. However, it ends up taking around an hour and 8 minutes. So he was able to shave off maybe 3 or 4 minutes before getting home, and on those rural roads that might be posted at 50 miles an hour, you could be driving 60 and cut off a significant amount of time over a 40-mile distance. When he gets back into Pullman, Washington, he's spotted on camera at 5:25, and it's seen on 5 different cameras on the way north on Stadium Way. As you can see right there, the arrows are pointing at different places where his car was spotted on camera. And his residence is up north right there. Then he makes it home, and for, I think it's 3.5 hours, he is likely cleaning up at his home, maybe even cleaning out his vehicle a little bit at this point. And then around 9 p.m., Kohberger's phone pings in a location that is consistent with him leaving his residence. But I don't think he turned his phone on as he was leaving his residence. I think he turned his phone on when he was a mile away or so, but it pinged on the same tower that his residence would use. And we know that the time that it takes to drive from Bryan Kohberger's home to 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, takes around 40 minutes. The probable cause affidavit only discusses 32 minutes of time, which is from 9 a.m. until 9:32 a.m. So I think we're getting ping information that isn't at his house yet. It's away from his home. He wouldn't have left his phone on pinging all the way to his residence. He probably thought it was just safe to turn his phone on a mile or so away from his home, and then maybe a mile from his home coming back. I think the phone pings on the way into Moscow, Idaho, on a cell tower that is also utilized by 1122 King Road, and that's on the way in. And then I think the time between 9:12 and 9:21 is the vehicle driving to the location of the residence, but not specifically right there, as we do not have any indication that it was caught on camera. So maybe 4.5 minutes in, and then 4.5 minutes out, probably turned his phone off while he was entering into Moscow, Idaho. And then when leaving, turned the phone on again, and it pinged at 9:21 while leaving, but already outside the city limits. So as you can see right now, the representation of the white Elantra is heading on Nez Perce Drive near the Sigma Chi fraternity, and then at some point drives around and just checks to see if there's any activity at the residence. Now I don't know where he went, so right here I just darken it out. Whatever way he went to check, we don't know specifically. Then immediately, upon noticing that there was no activity at their residence, heads back out the same way he came on Nez Perce Drive, driving by Sigma Chi again, and heads out of town. Now, if you look at the clock up there, I have representation up there about the time where his cell phone might ping, and as you can see right there, it's 9:16. About 9:21, I think he may have turned his phone back on again. I doubt he had his phone on while he was in Moscow, Idaho, but probably when he exited, he felt safe to turn it back on again. So inside of Moscow, Idaho, he would not have a cell phone on, and as you can see on the map right here, he's on Perimeter Drive. And then once he gets to Highway 8, he would head west to Pullman. And there we go from a wider shot. And look at the time up there. Now it's about 9:20. And you can see the Washington line there. Perhaps he was even using that as his on and off point. So as he's about to enter the state of Idaho, he turns off his phone. And then on the way back, after he exits Idaho and gets into the state of Washington, he then turns his phone back on, and that's when it pings again off of a tower. And there's a tower that is west of Moscow, Idaho, that is likely the one that services 1122 King Road. And as you can see right now, he's driving back down. I tried to line up the time to various points with Google Maps and sped up the clock accordingly. So as you can see, here comes the representation of the Elantra heading back to Pullman, Washington. Obviously, the car in this video is about 20 times larger than an actual vehicle driving there. And now it's 9:26. So what we're really seeing here is that when he went back to Moscow, Idaho, it was really just to drive by really quick and check his handiwork and then get the hell back out of there. He did not spend the 9 minutes from 9:12 to 9:21 hanging around looking for a sheath. Now, maybe he did go there to look for the sheath, but saw that there was too much activity, people just milling around outside, and didn't want to risk looking for it, so just merely turned around and left. But I have a suspicion that he went there to check out his handiwork. He was just really pumped to see the activity and realizing that what he has done is now going to make it out into the media. So then he heads back to his residence and likely got home probably sometime around 9:35. We don't know what Bryan Kohberger was doing from 9:35 to around 11:50, but we know according to Google Maps that Bryan Kohberger would have had to leave Pullman, Washington around 11:53 to get to Lewiston, Idaho and Clarkston, Washington around the time that he did. So Bryan Kohberger leaves Pullman, Washington, heads by Johnson, Washington, passes Colton, Washington, then goes down to Uniontown, then he's on 195, and then goes into Idaho on Highway 95 and heads into Lewiston, Idaho. Once he's in Lewiston, Idaho, he heads west to Clarkston, Washington, and then goes to a coffee shop. And it's called Kate's Cup of Joe Coffee, located at 810 Port Drive, Clarkston, Washington. Surveillance footage from the U.S. Chef Store located at 820 Port Drive, Clarkston, Washington, and adjacent to Kate's Cup of Joe showed a white Elantra consistent with suspect vehicle 1. So what's interesting about that is this is the first time that they were able to place a white Elantra and Bryan Kohberger's cell phone in precisely the same location. Then, after that, an even bigger significant moment was when Bryan Kohberger's vehicle pulled up to the Albertsons. His cell phone utilized cellular data in the area of Albertsons grocery store at 400 Bridge Street in Clarkston, Washington. And then around 12:49, the interior surveillance cameras showed Kohberger walk through the store, purchase unknown items at the checkout, and leave at approximately 1:04. So this moment is extremely significant as it ties Bryan Kohberger's face to the suspect vehicle and his cell phone at the same time, because they were able to see that his vehicle had just left the coffee shop and it's associated with his cell phone, and now we see Bryan Kohberger himself enter the Albertsons store, and now all three are tied together. Now at this point, Kohberger leaves the Albertsons, and obviously at that point he turned his cell phone off. because it doesn't ping again for almost 4.5 hours. And we don't know where he went. He could have gone south from Lewiston, Idaho, or Clarkston, Washington, maybe an hour-and-a-half drive, then drive back, then head up north. But what we do know is that around 5:32 and 5:36, his phone pinged near Johnson, Washington. Now, if you look at the cell towers, one of the sides of the cell tower, that's a cell tower that is 120, 120, and 120 degrees. There's one that points directly to the highway, so it's likely he was driving on that. Now, in this case, I have him driving up Highway 95, which is on the opposite side, but as you can see, at a location just prior to that, he could have gone left onto Highway 195, and that would take you near Johnson, Washington. I have him going up this way because I think it's possible that there are items that he placed up there during his exit from Moscow, Idaho after the murders that he's going to collect and move to a new location. There's no way of actually knowing that, but again, there's 4 hours of missing time here. Now, as you can see right here, on the clock, I'm representing how much time. We have no idea where Bryan Kohberger was. Law enforcement they might have him on camera somewhere else. They just haven't released that information at this point. So you can see the clock's ticking away, and right around 5:32, so we got another a couple hours to go here. So now it's 4 o'clock. And as you can see, that's a representation of the cell tower, and the wedge on the left is the portion of the cell tower that points right towards Highway 195. And when it gets to 5:32, you'll see it ping. So right now, Bryan Kohberger's phone is likely driving on Highway 195, and it pinged 5:32 and 5:36, and it pinged multiple times in between there. It just says indicated that between 5:32 and 5:36, the phone pinged. And then he turns his phone off, and his phone pings again around 8:30 in the evening back on the network. They were not specific in letting us know exactly where the phone pinged at 8:30 on the network. So as you can see by this video, there are some very interesting time frames here where Bryan Kohberger likely could have hid items. I think the most intriguing one, however, is just after the murders, when you know he's looking to get rid of the bloody knife and bloody clothing after heading south out of Moscow, Idaho. He would have almost immediately wanted to get rid of those items, and we're missing around 17 minutes of time, as it should have only taken 55 minutes to get from 1122 King Road to Bryan Kohberger's residence, but it took an hour and 7 minutes. But there's 17 minutes of missing time in the first leg, where he could have disposed of the bloody knife and clothing, but made up some time on the way back. So it seems like he shaved off 3 to 5 minutes by maybe speeding through the area where he cut across to get into Washington. It's interesting how he uses Idaho and Washington and where his phone pings and where it doesn't ping. Seems like he was pretty aware of what state he was in at any given time. So I really appreciate all of you guys for watching. If you could hit that like, share, and subscribe button, I would really appreciate it. And heck, maybe people can get out there and look in that first section. On my live show last night, we discussed in depth on where that possibly could be where the knife and clothing were dumped. There's really no way of us knowing if Bryan Kohberger did dump the bloody knife and bloody clothing, but the 17 minutes of missing time is certainly very interesting. So again, thank you for watching, and until next time, everybody, be safe out there.